Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Designing Your Post-Career Life with Ida Abbott, class of 1969. We're already filling the chat with where you're from. That was one of my notes I was going to ask you to do this afternoon. We really love to just see the full expanse of who's here with us and how many people are joining us today and where from. So it's super exciting. I'm seeing Greece and some other really interesting places as well. So I am Christy Kennedy. I am an alum of Smith myself, class of 2010, Albright House. And I am the Director of Alumni Professional Networks and Career Programs here at Smith. So I, along with my team, lead programs and events such as these that bring Smithies together to connect and build skills around their professional goals, which includes post-career goals, right? So in addition to our virtual events, our team offers in-person networking opportunities. We connect Smith alums with career coaches who are fellow Smithies like Ida. And we compile on-demand resources for you to access at any time to meet your individual career needs. So we have a fabulous YouTube page with past recordings of our sessions. We're going to share that out with you in our follow-up communication, so you can check it out. We have a great LinkedIn group with over 4,600 Smithies in it. So this allows for professional connections to be built online through social media. Anything a Smithy needs, this is what I always say, anything a Smithy needs to find your version of career or post-career success exists within our network. And so my team is really here to help you find what you're looking for from your Smith community. Ida Abbott has been in the legal profession as a lawyer, consultant, and thought leader for more than 4 decades. She was one of the first people to specialize in lawyers' professional development and retention and in advancing women into leadership, and remains a leading expert on mentoring and sponsorship as means to guide, support, and transform professional careers. In response to the evolving needs of her clients, most of her practice now is helping individuals and firms design strategies for retirement. Ida supports them by helping them create retirements that are right for them, their families, and their firms. And we're going to benefit from that insight and expertise today. Ida received her JD from Hastings College of the Law, her MA from the University of Miami, and obviously her bachelor's degree from Smith College. So we are so lucky to have you here with us today, Ida. And with that, I'll throw it over to you to get us started with today's workshop.
Oh, thank you so much, Christy. It's such a pleasure working with you and your team and everybody at Smith, and always having programs with any kind of interactions with Smith alums. The wonderful audience, and I thank you all for being here today. As Christy said, we'll be taking, we'll have an ongoing chat. We'll have chances for you all to participate more actively, and I hope you'll do that. We're going to talk about post-career lives because, well, actually, let me just jump right into it. I'm going to share my slides, and we can talk about some of the changes that we're seeing and some of the issues and trends and what that means for all of you. So we're going to be talking about, I've got to make sure my slides work. All right. A new way of thinking about what retirement is. When I wrote my book, Retirement by Design, it's now 3.5 years. Everybody, and in fact today, if any of you are involved in any kind of organization talking about retiring or retirement or having to deal with it, nobody likes the word retire. And so everybody, you may hear about rewire, renaissance, recharge. There are everything, reinvent. So we need to be thinking about it, because what retirement means today is very different than what it used to be, and the way most people have been thinking about it for a very long time. We'll also talk about your own lives. And what I'm going to share with you is a framework based in design thinking, which may be familiar to many of you. and totally unknown to others, but it's a wonderful, creative, more adaptive way of planning to solve, whether it's solving a problem or planning a future. It gives you much more flexibility. It's dynamic, and it's a way of putting together a plan that you can use that's most suitable and appropriate for you. And then I'll give you some exercises, and we'll go through some discussion and exercises that will give you a chance to get started right away. I realize that the audience, first of all, it's very exciting that there are so many of you from, all over the world participating today. And I realize people are different ages, different jobs and circumstances, totally different situations that may not resonate in a program about retirement. This is not specifically about leaving the workforce or, giving things up and, what to do so you can at least keep going. We're really talking about a way of thinking about your life and about moving forward. And getting into this, the first question we need to ask is, what is retirement today? Because, as I said, it's very different. So I'm going to ask you to write down in the chat one word you associate when you think about retirement. Give yourself a second to just, what word springs to mind? Don't think too much about it. We want a reaction. Let's see what kind of reactions we get.
We have a lot of freedom showing up in the chat.
Rebirth, right? Choice, gardening, irrelevance, losing your way. Oh my God, they're coming in so fast and furious.
I know. Golf. Tired. That's interesting. Reduce stress.
Impossible. Loss of identity. Okay. Multitasking, working on your own terms. As you can see, they are all over the place. And some of them, like freedom, actually, when we ask this question, freedom comes up most of the time. In certain professions in particular, things like impossible, irrelevant, those attitudes come up too, those reactions. They're not necessarily attitudes, but there are so many different things that we associate with retiring, and they're all over the place. They range pretty widely. So let's take a poll and see where you're coming from in terms of your own plans. Some of you may already be retired. Some of you are looking at retiring, 30 years from now. We also have people who retire and unretire, people who retire multiple times. But what we're seeing here is a lot of very positive responses. And a lot of people, aren't interested in retiring. And some people plan never to retire. And that is a perfectly legitimate answer. And I want to make clear that while I talk about this and while I help people transition into retirement, I'm not encouraging everybody to retire. There are plenty of reasons to keep working and certainly to keep active. And we'll talk about some of that as we go along. But the old-fashioned notion of retiring and, sitting on the porch, basically watching the grass grow and waiting to die, those days are long gone. Now, I don't know who wrote on the screen. It wasn't me. So somebody did, and they like number 2. That's all right too. But we've got most people at least looking forward to it or excited about it, with a few people dreading it or would prefer not to. So I'm going to close this. And, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that first I want to do another poll, because one of the things that retirement is often associated with is getting old and aging. And so I want to ask you what you think about what's considered old today. When I ask 30 years old, the 30-year-olds, I often get the answer 50 or 40. So a lot of this depends on where you are and what perspective you have. But what do you think is considered old today when you read either people in the field or demographers or any of the discussion about being old? And someone points out that age has made some decisions for me. And for a lot of people, that's the case, but most of us. Oh, and you're so smart, you got the answer right. 85 is the correct answer. People who are 85 and older happen to be the fastest growing demographic in the United States, and the second fastest is people over 100. So what we have is a population that is rapidly aging. And when people talk about feeling old, they may feel it, but really, for those of you who are concerned about this, and many people are, unless you're somewhere around 85, you're still not considered an old person in today's society. And there have been a number of studies, one recently that talked about the new thinking about retirement. It's done by AgeWave. And some of the things that we've seen change over the last few years are the whole notion of retirement not being given up. The word comes from the French. I didn't take French. I don't speak French, but the word, and somebody may be able to help me or correct me, retiré, basically is the French word that's at the root, and it means retreating and falling back. And some of the words that are associated that you can see in the chat are things like boredom and irrelevance. And, the whole, it has so many negative connotations. It's one of the reasons people keep groping for words to use as replacements for it. But the fact is that it's not so much about giving up on those things, it's being more engaged with the world and continuing to be engaged, something that I'm sure this audience appreciates, because curiosity and staying in a state of wonder at all of the possibilities out there is an important part of this new thinking. It's about not so much the anxiety about retirement as it is the freedom that retirement provides, and the happiness that many people feel when they are relieved of the pressures that come along with work. Another new idea is that not so much of being youthful, although you'd never know it from the media, because all of the advertising we see focuses still, or most of it, we're starting to see some inroads, with Martha Stewart and all of the other people we're seeing who are being featured. But for the most part, the idea of being useful, continuing to be useful, not worrying so much about being youthful. It's as somebody said, aging your body, a lot of decisions get made for you. And so it's not so much a matter of trying to pretend that 60 is the new 40, as much as it is appreciating that 60 is still youthful and gives you plenty of life ahead and plenty of chances to do many, many things. And then being hopeful and thinking of legacy, not just in terms of what you leave behind you financially or in terms of property or accomplishments, but also in terms of the values that you instill in others and what your life represents in terms of what you bring to the world. So let's, I want to move on a little bit to talk about, about life expectancy and give you some context to understand why some of these changes are taking place. Over the last 120 years, we have gained approximately 30 years, more than 30 years of life expectancy. Now, this is average life expectancy at birth. So in the United States in 2020, The average life expectancy was a little over 79. After COVID, the following year, the last 3 years, we are lower than that now. And it dropped down to, I think it was around 76 over the last 3 years. Last year, the first 2 years during and after COVID. Last year, it popped up a little bit. And so we're back at I think around 77, a little over 77. But we still have a way to go just to catch up. Now, we will, because most of that drop was due to COVID and the opioid epidemic, a lot of drug deaths. There have also been a number of stress-related and emotion-related deaths due to suicide and a lot of mental health. But much of that is being turned around, and so we expect this to continue. And so life expectancy is continuing to climb, and should in the foreseeable and long-term future. What this means, though, is that if you retire and stop working altogether in your early 60s, first of all, the better educated you are, the higher income you have, or at least in terms, that doesn't mean the highest income, but if you're fairly well off economically, you have access to good health care, your life expectancy is longer than average. And so, that could give you a life into your 90s or into your hundreds. And those extra years are not just tacked on to the end of life. It's not like everybody is going to be, sitting around like some, kind of sitting in a chair and waiting to be pushed around, be feeble and impaired. Those extra years are sprinkled throughout our lives, so that life is actually fuller, more active, healthier at all stages, including as you get into old age and beyond that. So if you're going to be living this long, what are you going to do for the next 30 years if you retire? Or even if it's 10 or 20 years? And some of the words that we saw on the screen had to do with boredom and irrelevance. And none of us want to be bored or irrelevant. And so we have to be thinking differently. It also means that where my generation was looking at a career as being a singular career, and we might have changed once or twice along the way, over the last couple of decades, really, we've been seeing people have multiple careers, and that's only going to increase. People are going to need to support themselves for 90 years, not, for 60 or 70 the way they thought. And so we need to be thinking about careers very differently. And what that translates to in terms of today's discussion is that people are transitioning in and out of not just jobs, but careers and different kinds of work engagements. And so we need to be adaptable, we need to be flexible, we need to constantly be thinking about what is the future going to be for us in terms of our work lives. So let's talk about how we think about it. To begin with, when we talk about retirement, we can talk about it as an event. It's that day on the calendar that means you are no longer in this job. You close the door behind you, you turn off the computer, you close up the shop, whatever you do, that's the event of retiring. But in fact, retiring is a transition because it is really entering a new stage of life. It's a different way of thinking. You may be walking into a new job or starting a new business or going into a new career, or you may be at the point where this is the end of it and you're ready to start giving back, something that a number of people also noted is associated with retiring. It may be a time to focus on family, to focus on you, and not to be worried about the income part of it, or not to be worried about the job status, or to be focused more on the things that are meaningful to you, that give you pleasure, that may or may not be associated with work. But the career part is in the past. And this may be permanent or it may be temporary. So I'm going to ask you a question. For a lot of people, it's very hard to let go. And what I think I'll do is stop sharing my screen for a minute, give you a chance to think about it, put it in the chat, or we'll be able, if you'd like to share something with the group, I'd love to have you participate that way. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And let's see what you think.
So the question is, why is it hard to let go? And we're going to keep an eye on the chat.
And I think if you raise your hand or put the little raise your hand icon up.
Yep.
And we'll some folks.
Lots about identity here, Ida. I'm seeing a lot about loss of purpose, financial considerations.
Right.
I'm looking to see if anyone's raising their hand.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, a lot of these things as we go along. Somebody who was underutilized, so it wasn't so hard to let go. Sometimes people make it easy for us. I know one of the issues that comes up often is that people retire without expecting to. They're often told it's time, and basically you're out. That's a much harder transition. Thinking about any of these things in advance makes the transition easier, but it's never easy when it's not your choice. One of the keys to making this a happy time is to be thinking in advance and kind of, planning for what this next stage might be, especially if there are hints. Sometimes people are totally blindsided, and sometimes they've had an idea this was coming. It's just a matter of the time. Okay, now somebody who, if it's your own business, or it's you're the person in charge, it is hard to let go when you're the one responsible for other people. And so, that requires a lot more planning, because sometimes you have to find a buyer for your business. You have to go through a much more extensive preparatory process in order to get the people who depend on you prepared. Okay, people, yeah. A lot of this has to do with unpredictable future. Yes, it's unpredictable, and we're going to talk about how to make some parts of it anyway a little bit more predictable. Yeah, there's so much that we accomplish. Do we have any people who want to speak up, or
no one's raised their hand, but lots in the chat, and I know we'll have discussion in just a minute, but I'm seeing the same thing you are. There's a lot of attachment to the schedule and being useful, and just the structure that work life provides that can be hard to imagine losing when you kind of leave that. Yeah, so do we want to
doing especially for women who, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the special issues that women face in retirement. There are some that apply to everybody, and all of them apply to everybody, but women in particular go through a few I don't know, they're not changes, they're situations, and we'll talk about what some of them are. But Oh, I'm glad somebody mentioned a spouse. That's some of the conflict that comes up very often is the spouse either continues to work and is resentful, or the times don't sync, or it's hard to realize that suddenly you're the one who, has all this time and you don't know what to do with it, but your spouse isn't available and you had hoped you'd be going off together to travel or whatever. There was one time early when I started getting into this field where I was working with two women, both of them very high-powered partners in law firms. Most of my work is with lawyers. It's not all with lawyers, and I deal with professionals and business people in a lot of different fields. But these two women, one of them had a husband who retired. He wanted to travel, he wanted to go, he wanted her around. He wanted what he thought of 30 years earlier was a wife that he had never had, because she was always working and was his peer. And suddenly he thought, had a very different sense of what it would mean now that she was at home. That was their conflict. The other was a woman married to a man who was a stay-at-home dad, and their last child was going off to college. She was exhausted. She wanted to retire, and he didn't want her to, because he was worried about what it would mean for their lifestyle and their finances. So, in both cases, part of the challenge is getting people, and I hope you'll know to do this, and you will do this in advance of retiring, is to work this out together. And in my book, which is kind of a workbook, it doesn't tell you what you're going to have to do. It gives you a lot of questions and exercises. There's a whole section on talking to your spouse, so that you're both in sync about timing and about what the changes will mean for you at home when the roles change and your lives change. People don't realize how much of a change that can be, and how much needs to be discussed early on, and often as you work things through. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, I see someone who's a one-person business. And when you're a solo, if it's something, I mean, one of the nicest things about the move I made into consulting, I practiced law for 20 years. And then I changed over and started a consulting practice. And as Christy mentioned in her very kind intro, I transitioned from doing general career development work and talent development work into focusing on retirement, because my clients were asking me, and I saw a huge need for support in this area. Everybody had financial planners, but nobody knew what they would do with their lives. The beautiful thing about being on your own is that you have the flexibility to continue. And if you have talents and expertise that people are still interested in, it allows you the flexibility of really tailoring your work to your schedule and to your market. And so you can keep going. It's what I said earlier about not necessarily retiring. You may choose instead to work differently, to work less, but to stay engaged with your profession, with your field, with the work that you've been doing, and the area that has given you so much meaning for so long. A lot of people don't find much meaning in work. People who do, people who find a great deal of identity and purpose and meaning in the work they do, especially in professional services, especially in the arts, especially in areas where you feel that your life is making a difference and that you matter because of the work that you do, it is very hard to give that up unless you have something ready to replace it. And that's the key to all of these, all the things that are so hard to let go of. It's hard most of the time because we don't know what's coming next. You've been climbing that ladder for so long, you're suddenly there, and the next step takes you off the ladder. So you want to have a lattice, you want to have something else to walk into, maybe not right away. It's absolutely fine to take off time, to relax, to spend time trying to figure it out. For many people, the search is really, that's the adventure of it all. Even if you never come to a conclusion or a particular something that you're going to do, but something to keep you engaged and busy and interested, so you don't become bored, so you don't feel irrelevant. All of that is really important, and it's what you need in order to make the letting go a little bit easier. So my gosh, we have an awful lot of these. Okay, I see someone who says, when you're in the kind of work that requires working with people for many years in therapy and it may be in business, there are a lot of different ways, then it is hard. But again, it's a matter of finding people and finding successors, preparing people, grooming them to move in, people that you trust and people that your clients trust and know. To just give you an example of how tricky it can be, my financial advisor a few years ago decided to retire, and he had a 3-year plan. He found 2 young advisors to take over his practice, and he planned for a year of transition where they would work together, and he introduced his clients to them and everything else. Everything was going smoothly, but 6 months in, he realized these were not the right people. They did not have the values and the interest in his clients that he wanted. He didn't feel right about leaving, and so he let them go. He spent more time, found someone else. That person, again, another year to transition. That worked out very, very well, but it delayed his plan by probably a year and a half. So it can be done, but it's also why you need to start planning sooner than later, because you never know, the clients may not like this person, you may not like this person, or not so much like, but may not feel that this is the best fit. If you own a business, you've got to find someone to take over the business, or prepare people, if you're going to close up shop, to find their next jobs. So a lot of different things. Let's see if there's something else here. Yes, someone says retirement I don't think should be needs to be monolithic or all at once. It doesn't, and we're going to talk about different phases actually in just a few minutes, or an approach that takes you through a variety of phases, not necessarily in a linear way, but there are many different aspects of this that can be going on at the same time. And certainly you can, that's why I say sometimes if you're in a position to gradually develop, give yourself an off ramp, an exit ramp, and take a phased retirement so that you're gradually winding down, or you're changing gradually. A lot of people have side hustles and they try out what they think they want to do while they're still working their jobs. And so when they finally leave that job, they have something that they've already tried out a little bit and are ready to then build up or move into. So a lot of different approaches. One of the other things that comes up, especially for a group like this, is you are so busy, and all of a sudden you're not. That calendar that was so full, and all the people that depended on you and that needed you, suddenly nobody does. Or maybe your spouse does, or maybe your kids want you to babysit or something for the grandkids or something like that. But you don't have that structure. You don't have that being on call for people who look to you as the expert. You've been the expert, but now you're going to be the beginner. You're entering a new stage. And so you're going to need to be thinking differently and filling in those blanks on the calendar in a way that is busy enough for you, but doesn't overwhelm you. Because we all know people, or at least I shouldn't assume that. I know a lot of people, they're almost always women, but not all, but I know some men in the same situation who tell me that they have retired and are busier than ever because they're interested in so many things. They can't wait to get started. And so they start doing everything at once. And they are in meetings and groups and doing things of all kinds. If that's what you need, that's great. If that's what you're trying to get away from, it's not so good. So you need to start pacing yourself. And this transition time is a wonderful time to start trying out different kinds of schedules, different kinds of commitments to see what works for me. What works for her or him down the block doesn't matter. What works for my sister or my brother or what worked for my parents doesn't necessarily work for me. So this is really the time you have to start thinking about what is going to work for me.
Do we want to see if some folks want to come off mute and engage in this more deeply about feeling ready to move on?
Yeah, I would love to hear what people have done to get themselves ready. I think there were some things in the chat, but if there are people who would be willing to speak up, I'd love to hear them.
Hi, it's Beth Hanso. I engaged with a life coach, and it was very helpful to have a third uninterested party kind of help me and my husband define what was important to us in terms of values and use that as the basis for deciding how and what we would do. It was still very scary, but I think having that support was wonderful.
Great. And there are many, many coaches, not all of them deal with people who are retiring. And a lot of times there are issues that a life coach, most people who hire life coaches tend to still be working and in their careers, and they're looking to kind of figure out how to have a life and keep working.
To that point, I worked with him for 7 years before I retired, so it was just a natural progression.
Right. And for a lot of people who are new and just looking for a coach, there are a lot of retirement coaches out there. A lot of people, I've been encouraging more and more people to go into this field because there is a much greater need than people realize. And so a lot of coaches I think are starting to recognize the unique aspects of retirement and to work in that area. I also appreciate that you use the word values and what's important to you. And one of the things to recognize when you're at this point in your life, when you're starting to take stock and think about what your future life is going to be, it's also a great time to start making sure that the values you've held that are deeply, ingrained in you, and the activities you participate in, whatever work you do or whatever activities you do, whether they're work or not, that they're in sync. A lot of have felt that the need to compromise many of those values in order to succeed. And David Brooks, in one of his books, talks about, I forget what they're called, something like work values or success values and eulogy values. And the success values, my term, I don't think that's his, are the ones that we use to succeed in life. They're the ones we go to the right schools, we get the right credentials, we get the right job, work for the right company, have our kids in the right schools, that kind of thing. Sometimes we're very happy in our lives because all of those things sync up with our values. Sometimes they don't. And so now is the time to think more about your eulogy values, the things you want people to remember the most about you. And it's a time to really start reflecting and thinking deeply about the things that do mean the most and how you can express those and live those when you move into this phase of your life.
Yeah, that's
okay,
great.
I see another hand.
Yeah, I see Angela. Go ahead.
So I was going to say that one of the things I've been embracing is a mindset shift. one of the things as Smithies is that we're driven to excellence.
Right.
But in that excellence, sometimes we're so focused on that we don't allow time to play and experiment. So one of the things that I've been experimenting is non-paid volunteer work. So, and certifications where I find something that hits a chord for me. So for example, I'm a certified master gardener in my community. I'm teaching swimming because I needed to learn myself. And that's one of the benefits. I get access to the pool, but I'm with little ones. And so that whole idea of prototyping or designing is trying new things where I know I'm going to be a novice, where I know I'm going to fail, where I know I will be the misfit, but working through that to perhaps discovering a new passion.
Well, that sums up my presentation. That's perfect, because this is the time to do it. And the fact that you're having fun doing it is the best part. But it's the time to try things and not worry. Who's going to judge you at this point in your life? You know, there was a book written, somebody sent me a book a few years ago called "You Can't Do That at Your Age." And, you know, and it was all about women who were doing all kinds of extraordinary things at their 70s and 80s and 90s, you know, but that's the wonderful thing about this time, is that you can try the things you never tried before, or the things you were worried about being embarrassed about. It doesn't matter. This is the time to focus on the things that are meaningful to you, that you enjoy. And there, you know, there really is no need to worry about judgment. There's a great television show. It's streaming. I think it's on Netflix. It's a Korean show. If you haven't seen it, it's called Navillera, Navillera. It's about a civil servant who retires at 70 and has always wanted to be a ballerino. And he takes up ballet dancing, first hides it from his family. It's about his relationship with a young man who is a prodigy, but has a terrible family life, you know, the relationship between the two of them. There are a lot of things to it, but, you know, everybody is against him doing this. And he does it because it's what's important to him. And so for any of you who want a good show and a little inspiration in this area, I recommend it. Okay, I see another hand up.
Yeah, Madeline, go ahead. Here, there we go.
Speaking of Netflix shows, there was a wonderful documentary about the blue zones, which feature areas in the world where people live to very old ages. And one of the things that I came away with is that life itself is work. You know, there's always a separation of life and work, my hobbies, my work, but all of life is work, our relationships, our health, staying active, exercising. I consider it all a work of art, really, right? It's like our life's work. But I'm an architect, I'm self-employed. I have my own business, I have a lot of flexibility, but I was always working 24/7 to keep up with clients and get new clients. And 5 years ago, I was in a near fatal car accident and I had a traumatic brain injury and I wasn't able to work full days anymore. I could only work in the morning and I had to take a nap every day and I had to stop like after lunch. And then when I recovered from that, I thought, okay, you know what? I am now semi-retired. I'm going to keep that schedule and I'm going to spend the afternoon with my dog or go out and go cross-country skiing or whatever it is. And I just, you know, I learned from that terrible accident that it's okay to just, you know, work a half day if you can, of course. You know, there's financial limitations. There's, you know, my kids in college still, but take those things that happened to you that were unexpected and that you thought was absolutely horrible, that changed your life, and then make that gradual transition, not have it be that monolithic thing that somebody said in the chat, so that you're not pulling the Band-Aid off so fast. You're just sort of going slowly and finding yourself, that new person, gradually.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that terrible story had a good resolution for you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, unfortunately, it's an old story that sometimes we have to respond to things instead of planning them, because there's so much in life that is unexpected. And one thing you learn the older you get, the more things are unexpected. And so you need to be ready for them, even though you never really are. You need to know they're coming and prepare yourself as well as you can. But taking that, making that realization is a very important step, to be able to then turn that into something that works for you, to let you do what you want to do for longer.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting us in on that, and for giving people that very good advice.
Yeah, Ida, I know the next question you want to pose is about kind of that other side of things, right? What's holding you back if you're not feeling ready? And talking about what it would take to make someone feel ready to take that step. So do we want to transition to that question at this
Sure.
time? And I can actually drop that in the chat and read it again, so you don't have to put your slides back up. But so thinking about, if you don't feel ready to move to a new stage, what is holding you back? And what would it take to make you feel ready?
Thank you so much. I've just turned 80, so a lot of this is past for me. But what I noticed was when we moved into a retirement community, my life changed a lot, because the freedom I had with my own business to have people come to the house and to drop things off on the porch, and that was gone. I didn't expect that, or didn't consider that. And because being in a high rise with 66 neighbors instead of 8 people around the block, was very, very different for me. And I feel affirmed by some of the things you said, like going from success values to eulogy values. That resonated very much with me. So thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. One of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute is what happens when we do change, circumstances change where we live and stuff. But yes, let's hear the next question.
Yeah, Elaine, go ahead and unmute.
This actually circles back a little bit to because I had my hand up just before we went over to what's holding you back. I just wanted to share that I've been gardening, perennial gardening, for 30 years, and it's increasingly clear to me that perennial gardening is all about hope, and it's all about change, and it's all about what am I seeing right now? And it's not for everyone, obviously, but I can't speak highly enough about the power of gardening.
That's beautiful. And one of the things I noticed in the discussion, I don't know how old people are on the call, but one of the things that people are sometimes surprised at is how, as we get older, our happiness level rises. There's something called the U-shaped curve of happiness, and people in their 40s, it's understandable, they're under the most stress. Many of them have families, many of them are building a career, but they tend to have more stress and anxiety, and they tend to be at the low in terms of happiness measures. But as you get older, as you find that you can bring more of your values into your life, as you make choices that resonate more for your own benefit in terms that are in sync with your values, people tend to become happier. And for somebody who's had something like perennial gardening and had the color and the beautiful things that come with it, along with the hard work, it's a wonderful symbol in a way of what we have as we focus on those beautiful things and those happy things as we get older. Doesn't mean you ignore the other. Everybody's got pests in the garden too, but being able to do that is a very hopeful thing. So I know we could keep going here, but I'd like to kind of get into some of the other materials. So I'm going to bring my slides back up.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're seeing in the chat you're about to address. So this is great.
Yeah, these
Every-
are some of the general issues that people experience when they retire. Money is something everybody worries about, and it doesn't matter if you are living on Social Security or you have $20 million in the bank. Especially as we're living older, longer lives, people worry they're going to outlive their savings. It's one of the greatest fears of almost everybody in retirement. What to do? If you don't have anything in mind, many people who have had very intense careers, everything they do is centered around their work. Even their social life is sometimes going out with clients or socializing with people you work with. You need to make sure that you think about what you're going to do to fill up not only the days, but now the years. And so you don't necessarily think about that all at once. You start days at a time, but we need to replace some of the things that we did because we had that structure. We knew what we were supposed to be doing when, and the kinds of demands people would make on us, and the kinds of work surprises that we could anticipate, and we could deal with those. But suddenly all of that vanishes. And so if it's gone, what are you going to do to bring it, to replace it? The same thing with purpose. Many people find purpose, and I mean with a big P, purpose, not just getting, what do I have to do to get up in the morning, or why do I get up in the morning for? But, they get a lot of their meaning from their work. And so again, those things are a real problem for many people. The isolation. Now, oh, I forget her name, the woman who just spoke about moving into a high rise. One of the nice things about that, there are limits, obviously, it changes your circumstances and what you were used to, but it builds up. It gives you automatically a community of people to interact with, whether you choose to or not, and I hope you choose to, but there are people around you, and there are things that you can do. The danger, of course, is losing the will to do it, especially as you get older. But it's a matter of importance getting beyond any sense of isolation. Many of you have probably heard about the epidemic of loneliness in this country, and how many older people in particular are affected by that. And we want to make sure that people stay connected. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then, of course, health is always a concern, yours or your spouse's or your partner's or your family, somebody else in the family or someone close to you. But women have a few particular issues that come up, and let's talk about some of those. Money, a special issue for women because many women don't have as much as men do because of the lower paying jobs that they've had, or the less time because many women have taken time off to have children or for other caregiving reasons, for others, different reasons that women often have more money concerns than men do. Gendered ageism. Women have dealt with the gender discrimination, especially if you reach the point where you're talking about retiring if you're in your 50s or 60s or 70s or older. Gender discrimination has been there, for most of your life. You've had to deal with it. Or if you're like, for most of us anyway. But the ageism just adds another element to it, and it just compounds the problem because as you get older, in our society that is so youth focused, old isn't admired the way it is in some Eastern cultures and other cultures around the world. You're kind of written off. That's what people are worried about. Many of us, inculcate that. We incorporate that in our own thinking and our own mindsets. And we have to get over that ourselves about what's appropriate, what's suitable. Everything from what should you do to what should you wear. There are discussions about whether older women should or shouldn't wear red lipstick, things like that. Some of them seem trivial, but many of them are very important, and we need to be battling this, whether we want to or not. Along with that goes the notion of invisibility and the fact that suddenly, people don't pay attention to you, and they don't give you the same kind of service and attention that they might if you were, 30 or 40. Few role models. Again, we have never had a lot of role models. We've had to kind of do that as you go and create our own. To be fair, men today don't have a lot of role models either for being retired, because so many of their role models were their fathers or their grandfathers, and many of them retired and stayed bored for the rest of their lives. So they're having to deal with this too. But women have even fewer, because there haven't even been very many women who retired from work before we started doing that. And then favors. This happens to women more than men, where suddenly, since you're not working, everybody assumes you've got all this time on your hands and you're available to them. It might be people from work calling you from, to handle something kind of off the books because they need your expertise. It could be a nonprofit you've worked with that you told them you're not going to continue anymore, but they need something and it's hard for you to say no. It could be your kids assuming you're always available to take care of their kids or their problems. But this whole idea that, you have all this time and you are available to do whatever everybody else needs. When, for some people, that's fine. And you want that and you enjoy that. But for many people, it's just an annoyance. And then the whole question of aging alone. Even though we see, I've lost 3 of my closest friends over the last several years. 2 of them were women. And none of them had reached that average life expectancy that I mentioned earlier. But we see a lot of women. The majority of widows and widowers, it tend to be women. Women who find themselves alone, either because they've never married, they've never had a partner, or they lose a partner either through death or divorce. There's an awful lot of divorce among people who are in their 60s and older. It's double the rate of divorce in younger population. And sometimes they may have children, but they live far away, or some of them are estranged, but most of the time it's a matter of distance, or their kids are too busy and they find themselves pretty much alone. That's a difficult problem, and it needs to be addressed on a lot of levels. Everything from, making sure you have a support network and a group of friends, to making sure you're living in a place that will give you some support and people to be around you, to healthcare, to all kinds of issues. That can be a program in itself. So I want to make the transition easier for you, and I want to give you some tips that I hope will do that. The first is start early. Start to think about these things wherever you are. And if you haven't done any planning, or you're in your 80s and you're bored, there's no reason to start, not to start right now, to start thinking about some of these things. And if you've already gone through it, helping somebody else plan is a wonderful way to stay important and relevant and serve the people around you. But start early, because that time just keeps going and it will get here sooner than you know it, especially if you're at the point where it's a serious consideration for you. Start doing financial planning. You can't really plan for the future if you don't know what your financial situation is going to be. If you can do that yourself, great. If you haven't started, find somebody to work with who can help you. Many people are surprised to find out that they can retire sooner than they think. They think they're going to need the income for a lot longer, and they want to quit, but they don't think they can. So sometimes it's good news, sometimes it's bad, because your planner will tell you, no, in order to live the kind of life you want, you either have to adjust your expectations or you need to work for another 10 years. So, or save differently or invest differently. The personal interest list is something you can start this minute. If you hear about anything that sounds interesting and you're trying to, at some point you'll want to figure out what you're going to do with your days. Write down and keep a list of everything that sounds interesting, whether it sounds stupid and silly, or whether it's something serious, something you've always wanted to do, something you've never thought of, people you meet at a cocktail party who tell you they're doing this, or at an office party and somebody says, this is my hobby, or my kids are doing something interesting, courses you might take, anything. Write it down, keep it in one place. And then when the time comes for you to start thinking about what you're going to do, you have a list of so many things that at some point in your life sounded interesting. You can start looking for patterns, looking for things that pop out at you, because yes, that still sounds interesting to me. It will make the whole process so much more efficient and less stressful for you when you have a list of interests that you have accumulated like that. Another few things to make it easier. Plant some seeds. If you know, for example, you want to volunteer and serve on some nonprofit boards, find those boards, find out early what it takes to participate, what your role might be, what the mission is. Try to get involved maybe before you retire so that you can test it out and see. If you want to move into a field like counseling, what kind of a certificate will you need? And can you get it? Someone in my class at Smith took a CPR course, decided that she liked it, and wound up getting certified to be an EMT with the local volunteer ambulance corps in her community, in her small town. So, if you know there's something out there you want to do, start making connections, finding out more, so that when the time comes, that will be easier. I'm going to talk quickly about the design thinking model, but the important thing is the mindset you come into it with. The first thing will come easy to this audience. It's curiosity. It's realizing that you are a beginner here, and there is so much out there that there's no reason ever to be bored. It's a question of really paying closer attention, staying curious, being open to new ideas, experiences, people, everything. Also, reframing your thinking. If one of the things, if you in your mind, the words and the conditions associated with retirement have to do with irrelevance, boredom, feebleness, things like that, turn them around. You may think, well, people who are retired are boring. On the other hand, turn that around, reframe it into a positive. I know people who are retired and who are really interesting. I'm going to retire and I'm an interesting person. That's not going to change. I'm just going to be interesting in a new way. So it's a matter of reframing, realizing the things that are dragging us back, holding us down, and turning those into positives. Being action-oriented. We've had some examples in the people who have spoken or written here today about doing things, not just writing down lists and making plans and making them beautiful and perfect. They can be as elegant as you want, but they're useless unless you try things. So it's an action orientation. It's going out and doing things. And then being collaborative. And that means you don't do this alone. You need other people in your life to talk to work with, to deal with, to bounce ideas off of. That's why you can have a personal advisory team. These are all kinds of people from different areas, people who you talk to all the time, give you support, do reality checks, push back when you're being silly or feeling sorry for yourself. People who may be professionals in your life, they may be spiritual advisors, doctors, anybody. They can be younger people who give you new ideas and inspiration. They should be and should include people who have already retired, who can be mentors to you, or you can be peer mentors. But it's a matter of making sure that you talk to other people and have these folks as part of your team. So let me jump into design thinking. And this is the process. It's a nonlinear process. it can be, as I said, these are phases, but they're not linear phases. So they can be going on at different times, and you can go back to them and move around in them depending on where you are and what's going on. The first is this deep awareness. We talked about values, understanding your values, but also what did you like in your work? What didn't you like? What do you never want to do again? How important is being a leader? If you're a leader, you're going to have more responsibility. Do you want responsibility in the future, or would you rather be a contributor or somebody who comes in from time to help? Understand where you are now, where you've been, what drives you, what motivates you, what's important to you. All of those things are at the heart of this process and of any kind of planning for the future. Then define some of the patterns that you see. Look for some of the negatives and what you need to reframe. And so you can start taking this huge mass of information to starting to put it into patterns and configurations that you can work with. And then ideate. That's basically brainstorming. It's going out there and thinking of ideas, throwing them up on a board, keeping track of them someplace if you use software for this sort of thing, doing mind maps, just anything that will help you come up with as many ideas as you can that will fit into the patterns and may actually fit, not even fit into them, maybe something totally new and different, but get them all out there. Pick a few, start to prioritize them, and prototype, which basically means try stuff, do things, build a prototype. As I've given you several examples and you've heard some in the discussion, things that will get you out there and trying things so that you'll know what works, and then you test. Does the reality match up to what you expected? Is this something I really do want to do, or did it sound good, but actually not? I'm not going to do that. So it's a way of going back, and if you don't want to, if that doesn't work out, you just go back and you pick up somewhere along the way and carry on again. So this is an ongoing process. It's not a plan that is written and you check off the different items that you're going to do. This is much more of an approach, a framework for you to be thinking and acting in. And along the way, you want to be thinking about some of these questions because you want to make sure that this is the time in your life where you can promote the values and find some purpose. And again, there's the little p purpose, which is basically, I matter to somebody. I am contributing to the world in some way. And the big P purpose, which may be a larger political or philosophical or spiritual activity, some way of having a much greater impact than you might otherwise. And make sure these are things that make you happy. There's no reason in your life, in the world today, for you to be doing a lot of things unless they have to do, obviously money, health. There are considerations out there that you need to address. But for other things, you want to make sure that this is a joyful time and that you're doing things that let you use the talents and strengths that you've built and that are fun and engaging. So what are some of the things? You can throw them out. I know people who are doing all of these things since they retired and everything more. If you want to throw in, if you are already retired or planning to retire and you have a plan, you know what you're going to do. Let's have you throw some of those things into the chat. I know there's a lot of travel involved and learning a language.
I love thinking about dogs. That's one of my favorites.
Okay, well, I know some people have become dog walkers, which is great. It gives you exercise and lets you spend time with the animals you love and help people. Volunteering of all kinds of volunteering. Getting a dog, yes, why not? Having a companion, I mean, there's no if you can have a dog and you like dogs, yes, recognize it's going to be work, because you have to take care of them more than the adult children you've probably raised and are out of the house. So all of these things, but
Ida,
the
I'm
choices are up to you.
I'm seeing join a board of directors. I don't know if you want to speak briefly on how that can feel, especially to apply those skills that you have from your career in that other context.
Well, yes. I mean, if you can join a board of directors and that's what you want to do, great. But you don't do that overnight. That's something that requires a great deal of planning. Some for nonprofit boards to find the right board and the good fit. But you also, if you're talking about a corporate board or a paying board, that requires a very long lead time. There are just a lot of steps. You have to set yourself up. You have to make sure you have the right credentials. You have to make sure that the credentials you have, which may be right in your job, are a good fit for the credentials that the organization is looking for and needs. I mean, we think that what we can do can be transferred. Many times they're easily transferable, but sometimes they're not. And we're surprised to hear that. So you need to start that investigation and preparation much, much earlier than you would for many of these other activities.
Definitely sounds like a future webinar topic in the making, I would say though.
There are loads of webinars, loads of programs about this, how to prepare yourself. And there are a lot of training programs, professional groups, women's groups in particular, have a lot of programs that prepare you to go on boards. But yeah, I mean, if you can get a job that pays you, $100,000 a year to go to some board meetings and be on committees and do work that you've already been doing most of your life and are comfortable with, why not? But like I say, you've got to set yourself up for that early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Then the next step is to draw yourself a picture. Now we're kind of low on time, so I'll ask you a few questions in a moment, but this is a picture for yourself. For many people, they'd rather draw, write a list. If that's better for you, that's fine. But you can do this one time, multiple times, pictures of what your life in retirement could look like, ideally. And it could be a day, it could be, bigger than that. If you have a lot of old magazines, I don't know if anybody still reads a lot of paper magazines, but if you have them and you're creatively inclined, you can cut them out and make pictures that way. You can use markers, pencils, it doesn't matter. This is for you. What would your ideal life in retirement look like? And here are some of the questions to think about. Where would you be? Some people would be at the beach, some in the mountains, some on a boat, some in a cabin, some on, on an ocean liner, some on a sailboat. So where are you? What are you doing? Who's with you? What do you look like? After years of dressing up to go to work, we've all gotten used to being more casual since COVID, but some people are still dressing up. What would you be wearing? What would be going on? How do you feel? And what do you feel in the atmosphere around you? What are your senses telling you? So it's a fun exercise. You can do it as often as you want. You can do it on one page or 1,000 pages. But start to see, it's a way of visualizing it. Start to look into your own head, your own imagination, to see what you could be doing. And then try stuff. I have one of my clients has been kind of secretly painting and wanting to be an artist her whole life. She's in finance. She's got an incredible job. She's retiring after 3 years of planning at the end of this year. And she is getting an AA degree in art history at a local community college because she wants to become an artist. But she's the kind of person who needs to take it very seriously from the foundation up. So she's going back to school. All of these things, if you want to fly trapeze and join the circus, there are plenty of places where you can do that. Many of you probably have heard about the woman who jumped out of went, did a parachute jump on her 100th birthday, and then did it again on her 102nd birthday, just because she wanted to. She died shortly after that, but she was 102. She had done it and done it again, and why not? So you can do serious things or silly things, but if there's something you're interested in and you want to, then go ahead and do it. And then you can decide whether to keep it or not. But these are the things you want to make sure, whatever you do when you retire, these things need to be included in your plan. You are all too smart, and you have been intellectually engaged and stimulated your whole lives. Now is not the time to stop that. It's the time to make sure that it continues. This is probably, for many people on this webinar, the easiest part of it. But it's still something you do need to make an effort sometimes to stay intellectually engaged and stimulated. Keep that mind active. The social engagement is another key element. We've talked about it to some degree, but I want to emphasize this, and some of you may have heard, there has been a lot of reports about it in the last year or so, because the people behind this long-term study at Harvard published a book about it. They've been studying the things that make people live longer. What elements, someone referred to blue zones, and they've studied the people who live in these areas extensively. One interesting finding in that study is that people in some of those locations, those blue zones, are actually living shorter lives, and they attribute much of that to westernization and fast food and changes in their lifestyle over the last few years. But the one thing that remains steady in almost all the research, it's been validated up and down, is the key to a long and healthy life is your relationships. It doesn't mean having 1,000 friends on Facebook or 100 friends that you talk to every day. It does mean having a few quality relationships, 1 or 2 or 3 at the least. But it's for so many reasons: emotional support, intellectual engagement, a feeling of purpose, a feeling of mattering, knowing that somebody is there for you and cares about you and that it's mutual. All of those things, the key to everything. Obviously you have to stay fit and healthy, and you need to do the other things that are good for you. But too many people, especially when they're busy with their careers, we very often let those relationships slide. We don't give them the kind of effort. As somebody pointed out, all of life involves work. It is work. And it's work sometimes to maintain those relationships. But if you have them, protect them, nurture them. And if you don't have a lot of those relationships, now is a wonderful time to reach out to old friends, to use the Smith Network, to talk to the people, the women in your house. All kinds of groups are having regular Zoom meetings and have been for the last few years. But make sure that those relationships are not neglected. Getting out, having exercise, play, watching your health, staying fit is important. Being creative, thinking about things in new ways, expanding your thoughts, and then this idea of being useful and having some purpose, mattering, contributing to the world. You can do it through volunteering. You can do it by going to a neighbor next door and helping them because they can't do things on their own. It can be taking care of a pet, getting that dog, knowing that that dog depends on you and that you have to care for it. And that's also, I suppose that would qualify as a relationship, right? So these are very, very important elements, but that relationship one often gets overlooked. And then you set your priorities when you're trying to schedule what you're going to do for the day or the month or the year. I wouldn't necessarily plan 20 years out, or at least if you do it in pencil. or something that you can move around. But certainly for more immediate activities, prioritize them, put them into some categories, do the really important things and some of the other interesting ones, and move up in order of priority and importance. And then, move them around, try them out, toss the ones that don't matter. I love using Post-its, and you can do it on, there are a lot of applications online that you can use as well to move things around until you get the schedule, the activities, the things that really are important to you. And then, I don't know, we have 3 minutes for questions.
We have 3 minutes. It was so chock
Right.
full. I think we've answered quite a few questions along the way, Ida. So what I wanted to suggest, I don't know if you can take your slides down really quickly. And oh yes, we have these offerings, which we will share all of this in our follow-up email. So Ida is generously offering a 75% discount on her e-course, Retirement by Design, which I understand is incredibly comprehensive and a much more in-depth look at this exact methodology that you've shared with us today, Ida.
It's actually not that intensive. What it is, you get a copy of the book and it has some extra thinking. It's a supplement to the book. They're all short videos and exercises. And then, but the book is available as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
awesome.
And then we've got some resources.
Thank you for really giving us this kind of support today, Ida. I'm excited, though based on your statistics, it seems like it may be a long way off for me, but something I can start thinking about now and planning for. So I'm excited about that. So just
thank you. And thanks to everyone at Smith and to this whole community.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Thanks, everyone. And we will be in touch. Take care.